Pablo, it's been a while since we got to spend time together, person
Yeah,
to person.
it's great to reconnect.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
So for those that don't know, I think I was employee number 7 at Verb with Pablo, and Pablo was number 3, I think.
That's right. Yeah, a lot of memories from that.
That's right. I remember the very first day. Do you remember that when we were up in that little small office on the second floor
Hmm.
before we actually moved
Oh
over to
yeah, at
Google?
SRI. Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
So that was fun times, and
Hmm.
building Verb with you at that time and putting the engineering together was always, I think, my fondest memory of my recruiting career. So thanks for that.
No, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you're here in Houston at the STS
Hmm.
show, and there's all kinds of talk going on around digital and robotics, soft tissue, primarily in nature. Was this your first time at the conference right now?
It's the first time at this conference,
Yeah.
at Eric Wilson's conference. Yes.
Yeah, Eric always throws a good conference, a super user of new technologies. What are you keeping your eyes on here now? You're with J&J now, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and what are you keeping your eyes on as you look at the landscape between digital, robotics, the blend of the two?
Well, so I think one of the big shifts that I've seen over the last couple of years is all the focus on digital technologies. So now you don't hear any talks in which they have platforms, robotic or non-robotic, in which they don't talk about how utilize the data that is coming out of it to improve some of the clinical applications. And so you can see that every company that is out there, even if they have a robot or a widget or whatever it is, they talk of it in the context of improving the operation, improving the process, making the clinician, better. And that's a remarkable shift from a few years ago.
The original intent on that was just all about the robot, right?
Yes.
And now it's indexing more towards the digital and the data and the delivery system of that, maybe that interfaces is whatever that robot is. You had a fascinating presentation yesterday, and something struck me. You were talking about data and you were talking about digital, and you said, while all this, and I'll paraphrase this, all this is very powerful, very valuable, but we're all trying to speak a language that nobody's quite agreed on yet, the basics of that language. Like when I say in English, cat, I know what a cat is, but everybody's tossing around digital and all the phrases that go with that, but there's not even agreed upon language as of right now, are there?
No, there isn't. It's really interesting because a surgeon was once describing to me surgery. The field of surgery is a bit like an iceberg. You have some of the tip is captured in books and in some of the classes that people take in medical school and so on. But underneath, there's most of the knowledge is really in the brains of surgeons, and they're used to sharing that knowledge at a very high level, at a very abstract level. So, for example, if I said I did a good dissection, or I did a bad dissection, we all talk about it, like we know what we're talking about, but good and bad means different things to different people. And so what we're doing now is really, trying to break that abstraction to a level of granularity that hasn't been available before. So when you start digging into any of those concepts in which we seem to agree, we realize that we actually didn't really understand what is a good dissection, what's a bad dissection, what's a good bleeder, what's a bad bleeder. And new words emerge because as you start digging in, more subtleties come in. It's like, well, bleeding is not so simple, actually. There's actually, 5 different categories of bleeding. And so you start almost, the fact that you're digging in deeper also almost starts creating a new language. I always think we create words in order to do something about them. We create concepts that allow us to interact with the world better. And in this case is sort of getting to a level of granularity that is going to allow us to improve things at a level that have not been before, is basically giving rise to almost a new language at a much higher level of granularity.
And that's imperative because I think we're being a little irresponsible, in my opinion, with just throwing around the word and the baggage of data. I see every time somebody's trying to raise around If they can tag the word digital or data onto it, they think
Yeah.
they could raise another 10 million in
Right.
that round. And it's worked in some cases. That's not really an easy sort of subject to harness at all in the industry, because everybody wants their piece of data. The payer wants it, and
Yeah.
the surgeon wants it, and the work team wants it, and the hospital wants it, all for their own use.
Yeah, yeah. You know, data is a good analogy for data is the word, you know, what we think about oil reservoirs, right? An oil reservoir, we know it's valuable, but it's only valuable if you can actually refine it, and if you can transport it, and if you can now use it, find, you know, an end consumer to actually utilize it for a certain purpose. And data is, you know, very much the same. We all have an intuition there's something valuable there, but unless you have an end-to-end you know, pipeline that demonstrates how it's actually going to benefit, you know, the patient, the hospital, you know, the surgeon education, it's very difficult to really you know, pinpoint what you should do with it, what type of data we should collect, at what granularity, and what should be the processes to, you know, to transform it. And that's what's missing, you know, right now. Really applications in which you show what is the benefit, because there's obviously a cost associated with processing it, acquiring it, you know, just analyzing it, etc.
And that data right now seems to be, you know, you had spent years at SRI in the robotics business, and then went into Verb and J&J, obviously, and, you know, the Oris franchise as well. You've seen those changes evolve pretty quickly over the few years that we've been in this. 5 or 6 years ago, you and I were together. And it seems to be the robots almost become ubiquitous, in my opinion, and the data coming off of it, or the potential data coming off of it, seems to be the delivery system, whether it's a patient monitoring device, a robot, a wearable. That's really changed the health tech industry a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's interesting because in some of the presentations yesterday, the parts that I found more interesting is actually the user interface that the surgeon is looking at, and the robot and the hardware, and, you know, just kind of fades away, and you realize that, yeah, I mean, the platform is just a conduit to, you know, collect that data, but what really makes the difference is when you're looking at a tumor, you know, okay, so what are the boundaries, what are the margins, you know, how you should do the dissection, how is the safety, and everything else doesn't really matter, because what matters for the quality of the operation is what the surgeon is looking at that time, and the decisions that they're making. And obviously all the post-operative, you know, side, which, you know, helps a continuous improvement process and so on the way that, you know, surgeons and the clinical team tackle operations. So yeah, the hardware more and more it really fades away in lieu of all the software applications that enable the surgeon to do their job better.
I'm seeing that more and more too in the current climate of intraoperative advisement, real-time advisement, whether it's visually, as you just mentioned, or guardrails, warning lights, highly preferred path, but that level of advisement based upon all the legacy data, giving that surgeon still time and in his or her hands to make a well-informed decision.
Absolutely, and, you know, the thing that is really amazing about this is, you know, and people forget that the biggest application for a lot of these intraoperative advice applications is really is not the experts, because the experts, it's hard to match human performance when a human has perfected their performance over, you know, years and thousands of operations. There's just a whole mass of people that are learning, and they want to get better, and they want to get better as soon as possible, and we want them to get better fast, because otherwise they're just training, you know, on patients, right? So, so you know, the having systems that are looking over your shoulder, that give you the confidence in the decisions that you're making, it makes a big difference. Right now, surgeons go from, you know, going through medical school, residency, and fellowship, and having a mentor looking at them to just being released in the world, We're like, no, they're completely on their own, encountering new situations in which they don't really have the confidence, to make the right decisions. And as a matter of fact, the technology is used right now where they're paging their mentors, and taking pictures with their iPhones, to tell them what to do. So there's a need out there in which just having a person, a computer, a mixture of both, looking over your shoulder and having a second pair of eyes, just knowing that gives a lot of confidence and sort of calmness into how you make decisions.
Yeah, sure. So there's always somebody there to touch, right, until you feel like you can ride without yourself. Also, one of the things I noticed it's going to be interesting to watch is I also think that this digital enablement is going to allow us to push certain parts of the procedure down to a competency level that doesn't have to be in the surgeon's hands, but maybe the work team helping sort of distribute the load and the cognitive load, as well as informing more of the work team. I'm curious to see how that's going to flesh out over the next few years.
Yeah, I think a lot of these technologies, I'd like to think of them as tools to empower the different stakeholders and players. So if we can have the surgeon become a super surgeon / radiologist, / whatever, right?
Right.
That really has a benefit for the patient, but it has a benefit in terms of growth, for the surgeon, and kind of percolates down to the clinical staff. If we can make the first assistant more like a surgeon and the scrub nurse more like, an assistant and so on, then you kind of elevate the game, and you also provide a personal benefit of, a path for growth, for all these team members.
Yeah, great. So personally, you've always been enthralled with technology. What are you going to be keeping your eyes on over the next 12, 24 months in the marketplace that is going to have you reading more books and studying more things? Because I know you're a lifelong student. I remember that as well.
Well, I mean, all these obviously all these technologies for AI and machine learning we're just starting to scratch the surface. Of what they can do. And the reason they're so fascinating is because, the same as robotics gives us an insights of how our body works, AI gives us insights on how our brain works and how we see the world. So there's some kind of a loop in which it allows us to, look at the way that these systems work and make decisions and make abstractions and allow you to reflect on the way you do it. In a way that allows, it's a bit more detached and more brings a bit of objectivity and improvement into it. So, whether it's even things that we consider very human, like curiosity, can we teach systems to be curious, ask questions? A lot of times, we know in leadership, the important thing is not to give the answer. A lot of times it's to ask the question. It's just asking the right question. Can we teach the systems? Can we, make them, practical in clinical environments? A big part of the friction. That's another aspect. So one is the science of it, right? Another aspect is the actual practical implementation in clinical settings. We throw a lot of technology to hospitals and clinicians, and a lot of times it's an overload. So they have tons of things to worry about. And you don't want to be throwing technologies that now create more friction and increase their cognitive load. You want to do the opposite. So how can we use technology to, free cycles from the clinical team to worry more about the patient instead of the technology or the logistics or whatever it is that is not related to patient care.
Right. So delivering information in the field of view might be one. Downloading the heavy cognitive load on a procedure, empowered maybe by a robotic assist, and then feeding information so a person doesn't have to look around and seek it out. It's there as a heads-up display or however it declares itself.
Yeah, and handling the logistics. If you look at circulating nurse or a scrub nurse or an assistant, if you just watch what they do, I bet that you'd find that probably 25% of their tasks are patient-driven, and 75% are around communicating, logistics, making sure this is ready, making sure that is ready, the timing, whatever, right? So could you use technology to free up, take care of all that logistics? If you need to call pre-op to tell the patient's ready, why can't the system do it by itself? If somebody needs to check that all the right equipment or supplies are there, again, why does the team need to worry about it? Why don't you just have a computer take care of that? There's like tons of connection points that people are constantly thinking about, that is, multitasking and taking our attention away from what's, from the ball. You want to keep your eye on the ball.
Right.
So how can we enable that?
Yeah. Well, my friend, always fascinating. Good to see you again.
It's awesome to see you.
I could sit here all day. All right. This is Joe Mullings, SDTS Houston. Be well.